What's up YouTube, devs of wargames, bringing you, as you can see before you, an updated Perform Pal or an updated Pendulum and Magician deck profile. Now this deck, if it remains untouched from the ban list, which I highly doubt it would do, is scheduled to be the next meta deck, especially with the introduction of Heavy Metaphor's Electromite. Now this card is insane, especially in this deck, because you know, previously with Pendulum Magicians, they had their own effects when they're destroyed, but now they've got a monster that helps them fill up their extra deck, destroy their monsters, and give them draws on top of that. So I'll be very surprised if certain stuff like Joker or Wisdom Eye, even Harmonized Magician remain untouched. But for now, as it stands, we haven't got a ban list, so this is my best deck profile for this deck, and it is incredibly powerful. There are a couple of options you can change with the deck, and I'll go through them when we get there. But without further ado, let's get cracking on the main deck for you. So we start off with triple Perform Pal Skullcrobat Joker, very standard, straightforward, and that is a must-have at 3. Triple Wisdom Eye, again a must-have at 3, and the exact same with Harmonizing Magician. You should all know what these cards do by now. They're incredibly powerful. Obviously, Skullcrobat Joker, you search out your Wisdom Eye, your Harmonizing, whatever you need, and then they start doing their other effects in the scale to kind of fill out your extra deck, fill out your monster zones, and then Harmonizing lets you special summon a level 4 Magician from your deck. But banish it when it leaves the field, but obviously if you use it as an XYZ material, it's not going to get banished, which is very, very nice. Next up we play triple purple Poison Magician. Again, I love this card in this deck because it is finally giving a Pendulum deck and a main deck out to anti-spell frames and floodgates that would have usually in the past stopped it near enough dead. So it's a very, very good card, and its scale effect to boost up the attack, again, is also very, very powerful. Now, next up we play Double Iris Magician. Now you can play this at 3. The reason I'm playing this at 2 is because I am trialling out Pendulum Paradox just to see how the deck kind of operates with that card. The reason we've only got 2 Iris is because we've got enough high scales to kind of deal with, and mainly what Iris is going to be searching us out is the trap, which is what we want to see, and of course Star Pendulum Graph. Now, on top of that, when you combo off properly, you can get incredibly powerful boards. So Double Iris, in my personal opinion, isn't required as much, which is the exact same with Black Fang as well. Because this deck relies more on going into Electromite and kind of abusing non-dark attribute monsters, Black Fang isn't required at 3 anymore. However, playing them at 3 is still absolutely fine, especially if you don't want to play any hand traps in the deck at all. And when we get to them, I'll explain my ratios on the hand traps. 2 Black Fang kind of works nicely in this build for me for now. Again, you could bump it up, but if you're going to bump anything up, it would probably be Double Iris first. Next up, we've got Double Oath Magician. Now, the reason we play 2 in this is because in this build, we are going for the rank 6 kind of play of Naruto. Now, going into Naruto, there is a crazy combo where you get Electromite, Naruto, and Vortex Dragon on the board, which is incredibly powerful because Vortex can pretty much negate anything by shuffling one of your extra deck monsters face up back into your deck. And then, of course, it remains on the board. Naruto is a detach and negate spell or trap. And then, especially if you've gone through Omegas as well, you've ripped your opponent out and, you know, there's no coming back from that board. It stops you getting evenly matched as well. And it's a very, very powerful kind of combo. Next up, I do play the 1 White Wing Magician purely because I want to be doing double Omega. Now, that's the only reason you play this. The whole idea is you would Pendulum summon 2 monsters plus the Harmonizing and your White Wing. Get your Harmonizing to get your White Wing from deck. You would have already had an Electrium in play ready to go. You would make 2 Omegas, rip 2 from your opponent's hand if you're going first. And then even on top of that, you might have had the ability to put 2 more monsters on board, or maybe at least 1 more monster on board to either upgrade Metaphor's Electromite to a Deco Talker, or in turn of that, make a XYZ Baguska. So not only have you ripped 2 from your opponent's hand with Omegas that are coming back in the next turn, but on top of that, you've also put on a Baguska on board, which is going to stop anything your opponent really puts on the field. Next up, we play triple Astrograph and triple Chronograph. Now, Astrograph is more important in my opinion than Chronograph, but because we're going for the Naruto plays, you do want triple Chronograph. Your other options are, of course, believe it or not, Abyss Active Curtain Raiser. Now, the reason that is important is because when you control no monsters, you can put it in the scale, destroy it, and special summon it from the scale. On top of that, the other options you can play in this deck are the Dark Worm Dragon, but that's a bit more niche kind of play, more direct route. These kind of work better because what you do is you put them in the scale, destroy them, and then use their effects to bring out a Stargazer or a Time Gazer Magician, which of course you play 1-ofs. The only issue with playing 2 lots of these is it does require 2 bricks. Now in the scale they're okay, but you want them in your deck. You don't want to see these in your hand. The best thing about Astrograph as well is the fact that it reacts to the destruction. So, like all people keep saying, Wavering Eyes is busted as hell, because Wavering Eyes, you activate that, you destroy your scales, you're going to get pluses off of them already, so don't worry about that. You then use Wavering Eyes to search out your Astrograph Sorcerer, and then your Astrograph responds to the destruction from Wavering Eyes and gets to special summon itself, and then search out one of the scales you've destroyed. But of course, if you've already had Astrograph in the scale, popped it to use its effect to get your your Stargazer Magician from your deck, and then further along down the line, you combo off and get another Astrograph from hand, you can search out the third Astrograph and then bring that out on board, which is how you get the Odd Eyes Vortex, Odd Eyes Absolute into Odd Eyes Vortex play. Finally, for our last Pendulum monster is Perform Power Pendulum Sorcerer, because it does combo off by destroying your scales, which can trigger your Astrograph from hand, or of course can trigger any of your other Pendulum scale effects that you might need. So it's technically like having a fourth Wavering Eyes or a third Wavering Eyes, in my opinion, in this deck. It can also be used as a scout if you absolutely have to. Now next up for the hand traps, we play Double Ghost Ogre and the 1 Maxi. 1 Maxi is quite self-explanatory, but Double Ghost Ogre is where it gets interesting. Now the reason we're only playing 3 hand traps is because you want to be seeing your scales. You want to see your Pendulum monsters in your hand. You don't want to clog down too much with hand traps. And obviously the worst case scenario is you would open up, like, if you play 3 Ashes, you would open up like 2 Ashes and an Ogre. That's 3 of your monsters already gone that you really, really need for your scales or Pendulum Summon out in order to get into your Electromite. Now you've got to remember, with this build, we want to get to our Electromite first turn without using our Pendulum Summon to then be able to abuse the effect as best as we possibly can, which is why we only play 2 Ghost Ogre and 1 Max C. Now in my opinion, Ghost Ogre is a little bit more powerful than Ash at this moment in time, going towards specific decks. Now, Ash is incredibly powerful as an all-round card. It will hit multiple decks, but Ghost Ogre can be even more powerful in the sense that, especially with Electromite, it can really, really hurt Electromite if you're going up against the mirror, which is kind of what we're expecting now that the Pendulum Shift has come. Not to mention, if the ban is absolutely new to Spirals or makes them weaker in comparison to Pendulum Magicians will take the top spot, which is where Ghost Ogre kind of sets in a little bit more. And you might choose to be putting in Effect Veilers over maybe Ashes sometimes, because yes, alright, Pendulum Magicians using Duelist Alliance, Wavering Eyes, Pendulum Call, and Star Pendulum Graph might be able to be hit with Ash, but Star Pendulum Graph can be hit with an Ogre as well, and you can kind of hit the scales a lot better with Ogre, should you want to be a bit more defensive. That's just my personal opinion. You know, you can play it however you like. Now for the spells, Triple Duelist Alliance. Now, Triple Duelist Alliance, again, is straightforward in this because you're searching out your Time Pendulum Graph, your Star Pendulum Graph. You can also now search out the brand new card Pendulum Paradox. Pendulum Paradox is a little bit better for later game, in the sense that, you know, or even in the early game, you could flood the board, fill up your extra deck with Electromite and then bring them back. I am purely testing out Paradox to see how it works in the deck and if it's actually worth playing. But nonetheless, it's still a good card to try out, which is why one of the Wavering Eyes has had to make way for that as an overall tester kind of spot. I still play the 1 Pendulum Call because if I'm able to like bait out the Ash, or if I deal with the Ash, Pendulum Call can be still a very, very powerful top deck, especially if you've got the discard fodder. If you top deck this with the discard fodder and your opponent ashes it, you go, cool, alright, GG, that's kind of how it's going to roll. But if they can't ash it and they can't out it, you've got your scales back, you're filling your board back up with a few monsters, depending on what else you have in hand or what you need to bring from the extra deck as well, and then you can kind of go from there. You can take out Pendulum Call if you want for a different option. Again, it comes down to personal preference. Last up, we've got the 1 Star Pendulum Graph and the 1 Pendulum Paradox. Now, Pendulum Paradox, you add 2 face-up Pendulum monsters with the same Pendulum scale, but different names from your extra deck to your hand. Now, the reason you probably want to run this less so is because the majority of your scales that have different names are 8 scales. So 8 scales are quite easy to revive. The 1 scales you've got is your White Wing Magician, which will probably be banished by the time you've got it out on board, your Astrograph Sorcerer, and of course your Pendulum, your Purple Poison Magician. The rest are mainly 8 scales, which are ones you're going to be reviving to give you a go. So it's not necessary in the deck, however it might be quite useful, which is why I'm still testing it. And then of course 2 Time Pendulum Graph. This trap is busted as hell, incredibly powerful. It would not surprise me if it gets hit on the ban list in some form, but for now, while we've got it, definitely play it at 2. It can be played at 1 should the ban list say you're going to only play at 1. But what you want to be able to have the ability of is if your opponent does deal with one of them, you've got a second one to go around. On top of that, with your heavy metaphors, Electrolyte, and of course your getting the names mixed up now. Your Time Star Magician in your extra deck. This can be incredibly powerful to deal with your opponent's back row. Especially if you're going first, you can obviously make a Tornado Dragon and a Time Pendulum Graph. Time Pendulum Graph deals with any monster threats, and then of course on top of that, your Tornado Dragon deals with the back row. Anyway, now onto the extra deck. Definitely 2 heavy Metamorphose Electrium. If you only have 1, that's fine. The idea is you're going to burn through them quite quickly because your opponent's not going to let you have this for long. Yes, if he wants to ash it, that's fine, but you still have other effects you can use on it because it's only going to negate that effect for that turn. On top of that, being able to have 2 can also help extend your board a little bit more, especially when the first one's gone through and you go into a Decode Talker. You can then, of course, use your second one and kind of float a little bit more from there. It gives you a bit more recovery space as well. We've then got the 1 Decode Talker and the 1 Borrow Load. Borrow Load, in my personal opinion, is the best level 4 link we've got so far, and is pretty much a must-have in this deck. Your Decode Talker is quite straightforward. It is in order to level up your heavy Metamorphose should you need it, and of course the non-targeting ability of it is quite useful. You don't have to play Decode. I've actually seen a couple of builds without it, but it is just an option for you to give a go. Next up, Double Omega. In this build, we want to be as kind of not scummy, but as degenerate as we possibly can be. And what could be more degenerate than Double Omega and then the ability to go into Naruto and, of course, your Odd Eyes Vortex and Absolute Dragon. If you don't want to play 2 Omegas, you can take it out for like an Ignister or a Bills if you want to go down that route. But for now, 2 Omegas, being able to make it gives you a couple more options. Should you not be able to make Naruto or Vortex, you then make Double Omega and put your opponent in a very, very sticky situation because they've only got 2 cards that they can, 3 cards they can kind of really play with. Next, for the level 8s, or the last level 8 synchro, is Supreme King Dragon Clearwing. Is incredibly powerful. Nuking all your opponent's special summon monsters, all your opponent's face-up monsters on the board is very, very good. And then the battle kind of calculation thing, if it battles an opponent's monster, you can destroy that monster, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's original attack. It's just incredibly powerful and does a lot for the deck. Even though it's only a 2500 level 8, it's still very, very useful, and I highly recommend playing him. Now, for the other extras easy plays, the 1 Naruto, the Moral Leader, obviously explain this one. You make it with your Chronograph and your Oath Dragon if you need to, and then you can negate spells and traps, which is very, very helpful. Your 1 Time Star, quite straightforward there, with your Tornado Dragon, your Baguska. Your Supreme King Dragon Dark Rebellion is a game win. Very, very powerful. Don't have to play if you don't want to. It's cheap and easy to play. But on top of that, I do like playing Performance Trapeze Magician. I don't know why anyone would not want to play this card, especially when you still have the ability for the OTK play with the Decode and Trapeze. It's very, very powerful and useful. And then finally we play the 1 Absolute and the 1 Vortex. Now obviously the whole idea is when you get rid of your Absolute, you bring your Vortex out. So you've got more of a defensive first turn play should you need it, but you also have more aggressive second turn plays all on top of that. Depending on what you're facing and the meta that it's going to define into after the upcoming ban list, and of course after we've seen what this new set can actually bring to the table. Anyway, that is it for the deck profile. Quite straightforward. There is a lot of room in the deck for you to be a bit more versatile. You can change stuff up and give it a couple of goes. Like I said, you've got the Abyss Actor as another alternative. The whole idea of the deck is to get into your Metamorphose Electrium without using your Pendulum Summon, to then be able to flood the board a lot more, abuse Electrium's effect to kind of fill out your extra deck, and move forward in that way. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. I hope this helps you build your deck. I hope it uses a decent structure, and you kind of got a path to follow in adapting the Magician deck for this upcoming format. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, guys, as always, happy dueling. Also, YouTube, thanks for watching that video. I hope you liked it. If you did, hit that like button. And of course, don't forget to hit that big red subscribe button in the bottom left-hand corner and the notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. We've got more deck profiles, duels, pack openings, and many more Yu-Gi-Oh videos coming up for you all year round. So don't forget to stay tuned for all of that. Thanks, and as always, guys, happy dueling.